Thank you for joining us for another episode of the UNspecial podcast. We are a space for parents to come be heard, supported, equipped, and inspired. We're not here to tell you what to do with your child, present the latest therapies or behavior modifications. We are simply here for you. We believe in community, and we know that everyone needs to be in community, and our hope and our goal is for every parent or educator to be in community with one another. Today on the show, we have our producer, the man behind the scenes, producing all of our content,
Yep.
and with a very vast experience in education.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get an in-depth detail on what it's like from the outside looking in, from an educational standpoint, looking into the special needs community. Lem, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on the show.
How you doing today?
It's great, man.
Tell us about yourself.
It's a beautiful day. Lem Usita. I have a doctorate in education from Biola University.
Mm.
I was a professor and administrator in higher education. I have 20 years teaching and leading at that level. And so, yeah, education is a big deal for me, but I don't have any special education background at all. Never took any classes. Um, just, so I've only taught 18 and up. So I've taught bachelor's, master's, and PhD courses.
Okay.
And so it's older students. And so so I have education background. My doctorate's in educational studies. And so a lot of developmental psychology, but like no special ed background as far as teaching or even classes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got the teaching stuff and, the studying, the developmental stuff, but like, I don't know anything. I don't have any special ed background at all.
What would you say about like what is your vantage point looking in from an educational standpoint into the special needs, special education community?
So I just sent you a blog post that I wrote 13 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I was blogging a ton when I was writing my dissertation, and my dissertation topic is on identity development, identity formation, and so I wrote a blog post on a teacher's perspective on you know somebody with special needs, and and in this post that I sent you, so I guess I was thinking about this 13 years ago. I had written that teachers, if they don't want to deal with the student, they typically will just label them as, oh, this kid's got ADHD, or this kid has some kind of disability, mainly because the teacher doesn't want to deal with them. I've heard
Right.
tons of stories, and it's interesting how like a general, a general ed teacher has that power to almost mislabel a kid or label a kid. Maybe they're not really mislabeling the kid, but they're going to label this kid ADHD purely because they don't want to deal with them. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And so like this post had to do with how sometimes our teachers, well, we probably all have stories of our teacher saying something about us. You're dumb, you're stupid, why can't you just calm down? You have ADHD, like whatever label this authority figure in our life has like given us, and then it sticks with us. And then from the identity side, like, we grow up with this label thinking that's who I am because this authority figure told me that, you know, I'm ADHD, or I don't pay attention, or I have a problem. You know what I'm saying? So that's what that
Hmm.
post was talking about. But yeah, I see in the last couple of years, I just see, I've just done some thinking. I'm no longer in education.
Right.
Part of it being, just seeing the problems in the educational system. And for me, my perspective is the educational system, they teach teachers how to teach to a particular standard. And so if your kid can't um if your kid doesn't hit those standard, then we have to put him in this special category because I can only teach within the confines of, whatever standardized. And so
Hmm.
whatever's outside of what I can teach, we just label as special.
So you think it's a lot of times misdiagnosed or
I think
mislabeled?
I think it's misdiagnosed, it's mislabeled, but it's not because the student has the problem. It's
Right.
because the teachers are woefully undertrained to deal with, something
Yeah.
outside of the standardized, like this is what a student should look like. Do you see
W-
what I'm saying?
Yeah. What do you think it would take to change that broken
Oh man.
system?
So so if typically like the stigma of a special needs kid is that you know that they have the disability, but in what I just described, the teacher has the disability.
Mm.
They have a teaching disability because they're not trained to handle somebody outside of this educational system. This is the standardized model. And so what needs to happen, I guess, education wise, is we need, like special ed teachers have a a different kind of training that makes them a special ed
Right.
teacher. And so I think,
I think they're like the title is education specialist.
right, education specialist, because you're working with students outside of like this is the standard.
Right. Right.
And so I think I think even just one course for any teacher to understand that like you're teaching within this system, right? And if you're going to put somebody outside of the system, which we do train for, like just an understanding, just the mind shift and mentality shift, a paradigm shift of like these kids are not, I don't have the ability to teach these kids. You know what I mean? It's a much different thing than like, man, I don't want to deal with this kid.
Right. Right.
And like take some ownership of the fact that like you're not trained. There's a teaching disability here. We're
Hmm.
not trained as educators to handle special needs because we've been brought up in the system that says, "Oh, these kids are different."
So then it gets put on the student or the kid.
Exactly.
That's messed up.
Right. The educational system needs to take responsibility. I think the teacher needs to take responsibility. Like, yeah, and so that's why there's a stigma around it. Like, and that stigma is this kid is broken or this kid needs to be fixed
Right.
because the system is what works.
I know my hands down favorite part of teaching special ed is taking my students into general ed classes. I just love the interactions, and it gives that student a sense of like I belong in here,
Yeah.
and they can see the world as everyone else does because they're so oftentimes just put in a special class with
Right.
other special needs and expected to improve,
Right.
which is crazy because you got 7 behaviors happening in one room and you expect them to change.
Right.
So then I would put them in wood shop, pottery. Wood shop probably wasn't the smartest thing.
The sander.
ASB, whatever. And there was always pushback from the general education teacher because they didn't want it to disrupt what they had going on in class.
Right.
And then B, which wasn't ever implied, but I got the sense that there was a lot of fear.
Yeah.
So if you had
Yeah, but if you don't have any of the training and you don't have the right mentality, then it is fear. But like these teachers can pass it off as like, oh, they're a problem, and I think that's a big problem. I think that's a big issue in education.
and then the parents feel it.
Right. Like it's
Is
their problem or they messed up or they created this problem. And
and
that's not the case at all.
And then I would get a lot of input from parents like, why isn't my kid in science class? Why
Right.
isn't he in history class?
Right.
Well, it's because it was there was so much pushback. So if you had a kid come in that had like apparent physical disabilities, say a wheelchair,
Hmm.
whatever, what what would you think?
that's hard for me, and and even just like learning more about special ed, and like when I think of special ed, I just tend to think about like the the I IQ side of things. You know what I
Right.
mean? Not really like the physical disability. And for me, like it's what we talked about. It's just the fear. It's something that I'm not used to. It's something that I'm not comfortable with because I just haven't had much experience with it. Like, like how. But I I I tell you, I'll tell you a story though. My sophomore year in college, I had a buddy, and we ended up being roommates, right? And he was a double major in history and poli sci or something like that. He's like some big shot attorney now. But he had a left upper arm, a big old elbow, and then his hand was at
Uh-huh.
his
Oh,
right
wow.
at his elbow. And then on his right side, he didn't have arm at all. Just right out of his shoulder came a hand. And so like when you shook his hand, like you had to go like to his,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and he like kind of was bow-legged and stuff, and Carl is his name, and
Okay.
like we teased him like a ton. You know what I mean? But he could do everything. He could, that little button on your shirt,
Yeah, yeah.
there it's little like up here, like it's all like big down
He
here,
could
and
get
then it's
to it.
like smaller. He could do that. Like he could put
Uh-huh.
that together. The only thing that he couldn't do was get clothes out of a dryer. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So like, but everything else in his life, like he could do, and like we just we I now that you mentioned that, I'm like, dude, I lived with him for a year, and
Uh-huh.
it was the best. Like the only thing I needed to help him with was, getting clothes out of the dryer. I had the top
Yeah.
bunk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, you gotta set him up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I'll tell another story about Carl, and like we've laughed about this so much, but like one time we went to go visit a friend's house, and Carl, like I'd put his hand here, and he'd be like, "Lem, give me some M&Ms." And so like the M&Ms was near me, and like I would do this all the time, just like tease him, but I would throw him the M&Ms, but just like a little out of his reach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he would either fall over if he like were to grab it.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Uh,
Or like, but like I totally knew it. And I would like tease him, and like I would throw it just right out of his, and he was good at catching things, but like he didn't have reach obviously because
yeah.
like his hands were here.
Fair.
And so I would just tease him about that. And eventually he'd like, "Bro, like what are you doing? Like toss it right here." Like, and then eventually I would toss it, but like we would just tease him
Yeah.
mercilessly about all the things, and we just treated him as normal
That's the
because
key.
like he could do everything for himself, and like and his mom actually, when his mom was pregnant with him, the doctors like suggested that like you just need to abort this baby because
Oh, wow.
he'll never amount to anything. Is
Jeez.
and mom said, no, this is my
Good for
child.
her.
And she had Carl, and I mean Carl played basketball. I mean, like
Yeah.
he was our sound guy, like like very capable. And like I said, like went to Villanova for law school, big shot attorney. I think he lives in DC these days, and just does stuff for the disability community. But like
So what it would take is just giving them opportunity to be normal
normal,
citizens in everyday life.
and treat them just like, now that I share all this, I'm like, wait, I had a
Yeah.
year.
It's just getting past that initial appearance. Because I know every time I had special needs students interacting with general ed students,
Yeah.
they were always super blessed.
Hmm.
Like the most impactful thing I ever did in class was I started the All-Star Olympics in Sandpoint,
Yeah.
and it was during COVID. So the school had a year of no like camaraderie for the whole school as a general, and I had two amazing student aides. And I got to school one day and I was like, "Hey, we need to do a massive event so that the whole school can get involved and then not label us as the weird class."
Right.
And so we threw the All-Star Olympics. I mean, it was in North Idaho. I tried to get wood chopping, but they didn't let me. So we were like wheeling wheelbarrows full of tree trunks, obstacle course, relay races.
Yeah.
ASB made the medals. No, ASB made all the signs. Welding made the medals. The business class made shirts. And it turned into this. There was like,
School wide,
yeah, school wide.
normal.
There
This
was
is just who we are.
probably 150 gen ed students cheering on our 12 athletes.
Yeah.
And I got way involved. We're painting their faces. We trained for like 6 months, and every single person came up to me and was like, "Are you going to do this again? Are you
Yeah.
going to do this again?"
Yeah.
Because it took off that blinder that they had, that this is the weird,
Yeah.
and their preconceived labels on them,
Yeah.
where it's like anyone who comes in contact with the community, they're super blessed.
Yeah.
They just got to get past it.
Yeah. And I mean, one other thing that really just kind of blows my mind is this special ed special needs number is just growing.
Yeah.
Like the percentage of students that, I mean, I don't know if we're just like diagnosing every little thing as a special need, but once the numbers start hitting 25%, 30%, like that's normal. I mean, if it was 2%, that would be like, that would be in that weird category, right?
Right.
But 25%
That's
of
a
our
lot.
kids, like, get diagnosed as special, that it's no longer like an anomalous kind of thing. This is
It's the
the
norm.
general population. It's normal.
Right.
And so I think there definitely needs to be some educational reform. Um, but I mean, we're not in roles where we can make those big changes, but we can in the communities that we're in, we can in the conversations. And that's part of the reason why I love being a part of Unspecial, because we can bring parents together for sure and help parents understand that paradigm shift from like these kids are not broken, this is all normal,
Mm-hmm.
and then gathering parents to like have community and conversation and hear each other. Like I'm really excited about that, and so like I can get behind that.
That'd be huge. As we wrap up, what is something you would want parents to know from a general education side of things? I know obviously not everyone shares the same mindset or heart as you in that sector.
Sure. um i I think everyone can learn, everyone can get better. And I'm not just talking about students. Like we can all level up. Parents can level up. Students can level up. Like we can shift our mentality. We can shift our paradigms. Like I think if parents commit to learning as well as teaching, does that make sense?
Yeah,
If the parents are committed to learning and teaching, then I think their child can learn. I think their child can, um, yeah, their child can advance. Their child can figure out that special thing that they
uh-huh.
can do better than anybody else.
What do you think it would take on the parent side?
Well, the thing that Unspecial provides, community, a
Yeah.
place to be heard. There's always somebody in the community that's further down the road than you. So like what have they done? Like what wisdom can we glean from
Mm-hmm.
people that have already done this before? Um
And emotionally, who's going through the same thing?
right, like the support that you get from, six other parents.
Right.
And one thing that I think you and I are passionate about is the divorce rate around parents that have special needs kids is astronomical. And there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of dads that I think need a kick in the pants, but then also need the support. They need the brotherhood of like, hey, this is your kid, this is your responsibility,
Yep.
this is your family. Um, like
And
I think
honestly,
that's huge.
a lot of that is just because they're alone.
Right.
They're trying to tackle this by themselves.
Yeah.
And we all know, like, can't do much alone.
Yeah. And so Unspecial, we're putting Unspecial together to like gather people, gather community, hopefully find, people that can support you and share their wisdom. And again, we're not here to give you the latest therapies and
No.
latest like strategies to try to fix, because that's not what we're here for.
Parents are tired of hearing about that.
But if we can help people understand that this is normal, the kids are not broken. If we can help them with that paradigm shift, if there's something truly special about your child, where they are superior than most kids, like if we can help people do that, like I'm all in on that.
Yeah. And that's what we're doing here.
Yep.
You can find us on
Instagram.
Instagram, UNspecial LLC, email.
Yeah.
What's our email?
Lem at unspecialllc.com and Zach at unspecialllc.com. And you can find this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we'll probably post this particular episode on YouTube. So like we're getting it out there.
And make sure to like, subscribe, and share this. That's the biggest thing. Share this with everybody you know
Yeah.
in the community, because we want them involved. We want them here, and we want them on the show.
Yep.
So hit us up. We'd love to have you, have conversations like this.
Yep.
And continue.
Yeah. We hope you have a unspecial day.
Unspecial.